So we had all the porta camids, we had separate, as you say, a marquee, which was all partitioned off into separate areas where people could eat. You had to have separate coloured wristbands to be able to use separate toilets, in a like big rank of toilets for everybody to be able to use and be able to be socially separate in that respect. Everybody was temperature tested when they came on in the morning. But more than that, because we normally would have, like, as I say, 100 people in the building working, and we could only have like 30, 35 on site, socially distanced with masks and all the rest of it. It became a precision thing where people had to not only come and do their work, but they had to come and arrive early, sit in a sort of separated area until they were able to get in, and the last lot got out, and then they were immediately in and work, whether it was from 7 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, to do what they needed to do and get it done. And then rather than staying and have the social, because what happens is people come and say, "Oh, we'll give you a couple of days," and then they stay for the week, joining in on anything they can join in on. Yeah. They had to go. I'm sorry, thanks very much, brilliant, off you go. And they would go. And when we came to the final thing, where we'd normally have 350 people in the reveal so that they could all see the people, that we could only invite 35 people. So that was harsh. But so all of those people that would have had the reveal, that took part in it, will have it tonight when they see it on telly for the first time. So yeah, there were massive challenges. Not, as always, we have to say that all credit doesn't go to SOS. It goes to the suppliers who give all the materials free, to the workmen who come and work for us free of charge. People travel from wherever they need to travel to get there. People put themselves up in accommodation, and all we do is feed them. But on this occasion, there is a special recognition to the 6 people in our office, half of whom are like under 25, youngsters who just produced this massive village and setup that where we could actually make this happen. It was quite extraordinary. But in terms of my favourite, how do I judge that versus?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because everyone, you've helped so many people, and everyone's benefited from it. So, I just think
versus like Grenfell, where we managed to get something built in a year when nothing else was built for them. How do you judge that against the Veteran Street, when we built an entire street so that there's 26 veteran families living there that were homeless before, and they've processed 500 veterans who've served their country into jobs and opportunities and housing now through that street? I mean, how do you judge one against the other? I'm just lucky to do what I do, I think, really.
Well, you've 21st year now, isn't it? So did you have any idea it would go on this long when you started in 1999?
No, we really didn't. When we got together, there's a couple of lovely stories I'll try and let you in on, because I don't get many other opportunities. For the building trade, it's maybe more appropriate. As well, when we first started, I did the pilot, and the pilot show to see whether and it was a bit more like changing rooms, because changing rooms had just started a year earlier. BBC decided that what they'd do is they needed another program where people would give tips. And they were scrabbling around trying to find builders, and we're really struggling. Once they agreed, we did the pilot with a bunch of people that worked together. They decided I was going to stay on it, and then they needed to find some builders. And they were desperately scrabbling around trying to find builders and couldn't. And one of the researchers' mums was having an extension done down in Devon, and Chris and Jules and Bob, who was our first sort of, before Mark was Mark, Bob was Mark, and those were a little team down in Devon who used to work on, and they were working on this extension. So the researcher said to them, "Will you come up and audition for the show?" And they said no. So, well, it'll be great fun and you can be on telly. And they were like, "Yeah, we don't want to be on telly." So look, I'm going to get in trouble at work because I can't find any builders. And they went, "Well, we don't want to do it." She said, "Well, I'll tell you what, we'll put you up in a hotel in Bristol for the night and pay your bar bill." So they come up to the audition, and because they didn't want the job, because they didn't want to do it, they decided they would just act. They would just clown about and do stupid stuff in the audition because they didn't want to do it. So when I saw the tapes with the director at the time, we looked at all these builders who were all trying to give tips and stuff. And then there were these 3 nutters that were like just clowning about. And I went, they're the ones we want. They're the... Yeah. So we basically talked them into it, and they decided that they would do. The initial run was we were going to make 6 programs. And then we got really close up to the wire, and we couldn't find an electrician anywhere that was any good at talking on camera, doing whatever they were doing. So we went to BBC Films electric department. So these are the cameramen who are like TV electricians who do studio lighting or film lighting, and said, "Have you got anyone?" And they said, "Well, we've got this bloke Billy who's up for retirement in 6 months' time." This is 21 years ago, and he's such a pain in the bum, he's hanging around the office. Would you at least take him off our hands if you've got like 6 months worth of work? Plus, it won't cost the production anything because we've got to pay him for 6 months anyway before he retires. So yeah, okay. So Billy turns up, not having done house electrics in years. He was a commercial electrician to begin with, then film electrician. I mean, you know, he did Band of Brothers, and he's worked on movies with Tom Hanks and all kinds of people. But we'd find him in his little van with his little book of home electrics, trying to work out what he's supposed to be doing in the house. So we started off and went to do the first day, and it was a disaster. The first day's film, it was a disaster. They couldn't. Chris used to smoke rollies in those days, and what he used to do is he'd mix up his plaster, and then he'd like to let it go off a little bit before he started spreading. So the time was exactly the amount of time it took him to roll a fag, light a fag, and then he'd up it on his Orkin trail, and off he'd go. We did this, and the director went, "You can't smoke on TV." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you can't have a fag in your mouth on TV." I was like, "Oh." So he took the fag out, and he went, "I can't plaster without a fag in my mouth. It's like it's what I've done for like 20 years. I can't.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel right." So I then tore a little bit off the end of his fag and stuck it between his lips where you couldn't see it, so he could feel it, and he started plastering. Anyway, it was all we tried to get him to do tips, and they were hopeless. Like, you know, none of us. It just wasn't working at all. But that evening we went to the pub and we all started drinking and having a laugh. And I said to the director, "This isn't going to work. But if you film them, like the building site banter was fantastic. I mean, quite non-PC to be fair, but proper funny. They're proper funny lads, and taking the mick out of Billy because he kept on fusing the lights and, you know, all kinds of stuff going on. So I said, film that instead. So we did, and the BBC had left us alone to shoot 6 episodes. So we came back with these 6 episodes, and the BBC hated them. I mean, literally, and said we're not going to broadcast them because they were just weren't what they'd asked for. And they sat on the shelf for about 4 months, and then there was some gap in the schedule for something because of European football or something that hadn't happened. So they had to put them out, and the first series got like 8.5 million viewers. So they came back to us and said, "We always loved it. Go and make some more." And that was 21 years ago.
Well, you've heard it here first on Talking Trade Live. If it wasn't for trades doing what we do best, having a crack, there wouldn't be a DIY SOS. And is that one thing, Nick, that you must have loved the last 21 years? Us trades do piss about and have a crack, and a day's work is never the same. And it's actually a lot of fun, despite all the graft.
Yeah, look, when we were just us, before we became the big bill, there was just us. And so and certain things became the gags that we did, like Billy being useless electrics. I mean, he's perfectly capable and perfectly good. I mean, he's, as I say, he's worked on huge film sets and he's well respected in the film world, believe it or not. But we made a thing more of that, so that every time the lights went off, it was like, you know, it's Billy's fault. And he became known, because the lights kept on going off whilst we were filming, he became known as the Prince of Darkness, to the extent that when we actually did the build for the veterans up in Manchester, I was chatting away to Prince William, who'd come along on the build there, and Billy suddenly walks in and goes, "You know, me and him have got the same name?" And I said, "Yes, Bill," because obviously William Byrd and he went, and he said to Prince William, "Tell him what it is." And Prince William said, "Prince of Darkness." so I didn't know, and it was literally completely unscripted. It was just because Prince William actually used to watch the program quite a bit, so he knew Billy was called the Prince of Darkness. So yeah, that was one meme, and the other thing was that I never do anything, and I'm useless, and I don't know what I'm doing on a building site, and I'm completely hopeless. Which, I mean, when I left school, I travelled around the world playing rugby, and one of the things I used to travel to rugby clubs because you've instantly got a load of mates that you can then help you find a job or somewhere to stay or whatever. And I travel around the world using rugby clubs to do it. But I also worked on building sites, so I laboured. I was a hoddy and used to carry bricks and on an old hod. Or hilariously, we were on a job out 2 years ago, and somebody turned up with a hod. I hadn't seen one in years. Have you seen one recently?
Not recently, no. No.
Yeah, you're not supposed to have them anymore. I don't think you're allowed to use them on sites anymore. You're not. I think probably health and safety means you can't have a hod. Anyway,
well,
this bloke
don't know what to do. Bless them.
You have to get these conveyors now, don't you?
Yeah. Or wheelbarrow.
Yeah. So this bloke turns up with a hod. I was like, oh wow. When I was 23 and I was living in Australia, I was a hod carrier. I used to like, all day. It's great fitness to be a hod carrier. If you're playing rugby, it's great all week to be carrying bricks up and down ladders. It's bloody fantastic. So I said, look at this. So I loaded up the hod with the number of bricks I used to carry up ladders. This is when I'm 54. Not only could I not walk it up a ladder, I couldn't lift it onto my shoulder. I couldn't get it off the floor. That's how old and knackered I've become in the meantime. So
is this all going to be evidence tonight then, Nick? That
no, this one wasn't. This was on. You'll find it on an episode a couple of years ago. There's one of the weird things about doing a program for 21 years is that you can see me age 21 years in a couple of episodes back to back on somewhere like Dave Channel. My Julian and Billy look vaguely similar because over the 21 years, not a great deal of change. But me and Chris both look like we've been run over by a truck in the intervening time. It's not a pretty difference. But so these sort of themes became sort of ongoing sort of comedy themes, and we just had a laugh, and and that building site humour that everybody who's ever worked on a site knows became things that we could do. And there were things that we used to make jokes about. Like at one stage, we were told we had to wear hard hats because we didn't used to wear hard hats when we first started. And I said to the boys, they were knocking down a plaster and a plaster wall, like a plaster and
lard and plaster.
Yeah, a lard and plaster wall, and nothing else in it. And so I said to Julian, I stopped him because this is years and years ago, and I said, you need to use a hard hat, mate. So I said, quite right. So he put the sledgehammer down, and then basically used the hard hat to batter the wall down. So there was that kind of stupid stuff. We'd shave one side of the wall off so that you only had the wood and the plaster on the other side, and then make Julian run through it to knock it over. Just stupid stuff. Like every time Billy went to drill through the ceiling into a rafter, we'd make sure someone was up there with a plastic cup of water, so that he drilled into the bottom of the plastic cup of water and thought he'd hit a pipe. All the usual old gags that we did. And we were doing all that stuff on telly, and people just genuinely liked it. And I think what happened was that builders would come up to us in the pub, which is where we lived most of the time, and say to us, yours is more like a proper building site than any other programs on TV. So if you ever need extra help, we'd like to come and join in. And we said to the BBC at one stage, look, there are times we go and do like a living room for a family that have got a child with a disability, and we know they're never going to get round to the rest of the house, and they desperately need access and all kinds of other things. We reckon we could do a whole house because we think builders will come and join in with us. Yeah. So they said, all right, well, about 8 years into it, they said, we'll give it a go. We'll give you an hour-long programme. The first one was up in Anglesey. And we turned up on the first day, not knowing who was going to turn up, having put the word out. And basically about 150 trades turned up. And we did the first one, and we never did a short one after that.
Is that one thing that's always surprised you, Nick, the amount of tradespeople that are willing to give up their time? As you say, they put themselves up if they're coming from further afield. It's one thing I've loved being in the industry. We're passionate, kind people. Yeah, we have a laugh and we work hard, but not just your projects, but Band of Builders and many others going on. There's never a shortage of trades, even if they're struggling themselves.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary thing. I've been involved with Band of Builders since the very moment it started. When they first started, one of the lad who started it was building for his mate who had been given a terminal cancer diagnosis. Yeah. And somebody had written to me and said, he's doing this amazing thing. He's got a load of builders to do this amazing thing. Can you give him a ring? So I rang him one day when I was on a SOS, and actually he was on a digger. And I rang him up. I was like, hello. And he said, hello. I said, this is Nick Knowles. He went, sod off, who is it? I was like, no, it's me. Like he went, seriously, I'm busy. Stop messing about, who is it? And I was like, no, it's Nick Knowles. And he hung up on me. I had to ring him 3 times before he finally accepted the call. And we stayed in contact throughout. And as he grew Band of Builders, I sort of stayed in contact with him. And now it's this extraordinary 10,000 members, I think, builders all over the country doing amazing work. But there's lots of them, actually. There's lots of little groups that have sort of mimic SOS all over the country. But you're right. The thing about thing people don't understand about the construction industry, it's full of good, decent, hard-working people, making a living and trying to do the best by their families. And yes, they'll rip the piss out of each other harder than anybody else would in most other trades, and it can be quite a banterful site. but they've also got a real sense of what's decent and what's not. So it's like our lot. We rip amongst ourselves, but we get very protective when anybody else has a go at our little group. Do you know what I mean?
So why does the construction industry get such a shit rap? I mean, the press love tearing into cowboy builders and leaving family high and dry and people grabbing money and running off. But you've seen it firsthand. That is such a minority. The bulk of, 1.5 million tradespeople, decent people willing to give their arm and leg. Why do we get a bad rap?
I think it doesn't help that people have, like various politicians and things, have referred to white van man at some stage, and that sort of lumps in with it. That certainly hasn't helped. But also, you're absolutely right. The television coverage of the industry has been almost deliberately negative, and I say this quite a lot to the lads when everybody turns up on a DIY SOS. I'm stood there with about 100 people in front of me, and I say to them, look, there's several reasons why you might come and join in. One is to try and get some publicity. You won't, because we can't feature people's names. The only thing you'll get out of this is knowing that you've done something amazing for a family that desperately needed it or in a worse state than yours. It might be because you want to find out whether we're like we actually are on the program, or whether we're like that in real life, or whether we're a bunch of arses. I can tell you we are a bunch of arses, but we'll be here every day with you, having a laugh with you and getting stuck in like everybody else. But also there's this sense of, like you say, of changing people's perceptions. So we've worked with 21,000 builders over the 21 years. We reckon it's about 21,000 builders. They've all come and given their time for free. And this industry, the construction industry, is what gets this country off its arse every time there's a recession. You know, people investing in building houses, building flats, building utilities. And this industry keeps going. And when there's a recession, builders find a way to keep things going and finding a way to work. It's a really important industry. It's a multi-billion-pound industry, and yet it's represented on TV as if it's some half-assed bunch of jack-the-lads making things up as they go along. And, you know, cowboy builders, the road builders, the cowboy trap, even on grand designs, Kevin wanders on with a long face. And I know he's got a long face, but there's a particular scene where he comes on with a long face and he goes, and this was when the constructor walked off the job. And you go, you know, it drives you mad. And so we've been very proud of the fact that SOS shows and showcases what we're capable of when we do an entire street in 15 days, because we've got over 1,000 builders a day on it. Or we build at Grenfell when nobody's built anything at Grenfell. We build under the A40 in a way that's, you know, technically really tough. Or we build this surfboard-shaped building down in West Wales. And wherever we go in the country, no matter how remote or how city location we are, people just come out and join in because it's a really just straightforward, decent way to go and make a living. Learn a trade, earn a living, work hard, build up your business, build up a reputation. And like you say, the cowboys and the people who give it a bad reputation are less than 1% of the industry. I would say less than 0.5% of the industry. And we're the only people flying the flag for the people who actually do a decent job.
You think we're 10% nearly of the economy. We were the first back to work with COVID. Yeah. The amazing thing for me is you always can have work no matter where you are in the world. Similar to you, I learned in Sydney when I lived out there. God, they work you hard there compared with us lot here. And then you can build a company. You can go into health and safety, training, media. There's all these options, and we're looked at as, you know, we're still told at school, Nick. This is the thing: if you're a bit thick, go and dig a hole. That's what I was told. Whereas you look at France, Belgium, Germany, tradespeople are regarded on the same level as doctors and solicitors. And before we get onto questions with lots of viewers getting in touch, what do you think we need to do to get this industry looked at? Because it is a bloody good industry to get into and get more youngsters in.
We need to be stop being obsessed as a nation with people getting degrees.
Yeah.
There's an ambition amongst some of the politicians to get half the country, half school leavers, to have degrees. At the point where half the school leavers have degrees, they're pointless because half the country's got a degree. I mean, it's kind of meaningless. There are things that you need a degree for. You know, engineering, being a lawyer, being an architect, doctors, vets. There are things you need degrees for. But getting degrees for the sake of degrees, and I'm not denigrating anybody's education, I'm just saying that the ambition to do that far outweighs the opportunity. So you've got a lot of people coming out of university with degrees when they're like 50 grand in debt with no jobs to go to, or they end up stacking shelves because the jobs aren't available. If we start valuing apprenticeships more, By the age of 18, 19, you're earning a decent living. By the age of 20, 21, you could be owning your own house. By the age of 25, you can be employing 10 lads and getting the business going. Chris and Jules, who work with me, always talk about the fact that they've got no learning and they've got no education, and they didn't do very well at school, and they're not very bright. That's what they say themselves. They're incredibly bright. We'll stand in a room and I'll go, what do we need here? And they'll go, well, it's 5 meters by 4 meters, and we'll need 4 cubic ton of metric ton. We've got this and that and the other, and you'll need 48 boards, blah, blah, blah. And you go, well, you just did maths. And they go, no, it's not maths, it's building. Which actually, it's just, there are really, it's a real chance. And if you haven't really grabbed onto your education when you were at school, it doesn't mean you're not bright. It just means that you weren't good at learning and sitting there and paying attention and doing the things that you were doing. Rather than losing those people and telling them that they failed because they haven't necessarily come out with the qualifications that other people have, put them towards apprenticeships, which are as value. Because I can guarantee you that if you take up plastering, and you do really well and you work hard, you'll be earning a really good living at the moment, because plastering's, everybody wants plasterers at the moment. Bricklayers, same thing. You can be earning a really good living. Within 2 or 3 years, if you're good at getting jobs and being tidy and doing a good job and looking after the customer, you can employ 2 or 3, 4 people. Suddenly you've got yourself a business. And if your business does well, you could expand. There's a bloke that I know, Hodgkinson, up in Derby, drives around in a Range Rover. He's got a multi-million-pound business. Bricklayers. He did an apprenticeship like everybody else. Chris has got plasterers working for him now, and he's got a home, and he's renting out a cottage that he's doing it. We've got to change the idea that somehow apprenticeships are worth less than degrees. At the moment, for school leavers, an apprenticeship can be much more valuable.
I'd love to have you back on, Nick, because this is something we could talk about in depth. My view is it starts with government. The apprenticeships, I'd like to take more people on, but it's a bloody mess. It's a nightmare, apprenticeships. I don't think they're where they should be. I just want to get some questions in from viewers. If you are watching, we've got 5-10 minutes left. Obviously chatting with the brilliant Nick Knowles about DIY SOS tonight, BBC 1, 8 o'clock. It's well worth watching. He's tucking into, is that a chicken goujon?
No, it's a massive bacon and chorizo turkey sandwich. My son, who's staying with me during lockdown, has just made for me, which is tasty, I can tell you.
Well, one question I had, which I think is a very important question, being in the trade, red or brown sauce with a bacon sandwich?
First of all, no sauce on a bacon sandwich. You don't want sauce on a bacon sandwich. Sausage sandwich, brown sauce with a sausage sandwich, never a tomato. There's no room for a fruit on a breakfast plate in any form.
Well, you've heard it here first, ladies and gents. No sauce on a bacon sandwich. Nick, I had you up on a pedestal, but you've just fallen off that, unfortunately, with that comment. But on to another, my friends, on to another one. What's the hardest thing to organise on one of your projects? Is it the materials being delivered on time? Because listen, us trades know you get promised first drop and it turns up at 3:45. Is it the men and women coming in? Is it the logistics? Is it drying time? What's the hardest thing over the last 21 years you wish you could somehow get better?
Trying to find Billy. It's like, honestly, organising Billy's like juggling sand.
He got his first football, didn't he, the other night? He 70? He got his first England cap, didn't he? Playing football last.
Yeah, playing. He's taken up walking football, which is now becoming. They've got an international team, and he won his first cap. So, he's over the moon about that. He loves his football. In fact, there's several pubs that he's not allowed in Welwyn Garden City anymore because he gets so vocal about the football that he's been banned. So, in his younger days, when we first started, there was only the hospital club he was allowed to go in the whole of Welwyn Garden City. But he's mellowed over the years, so he's all right now. No, I think logistics obviously is the thing, deliveries, but that when you're working on the kind of schedule that we're working on, something arriving even 6 hours late can absolutely be critical on what we do. The other thing that's interesting actually on that basis is what people always think, I think, because we build in 9 days, people assume that the finish must be not very good. But in actual fact, what happens is all the trades that come in, they're so keen to show that what they do is good that they make sure that their bit that they do is perfect. And so you end up with this extraordinary, perfect building because everybody's at the top of their game. And people say, well, you know, don't you get people come in who don't know what they're doing? You don't volunteer for something like that if you don't know what you're doing. If you haven't, to be honest, you don't volunteer if you haven't done reasonably well in life so that you can afford to take a few days to be able to do it anyway. And usually we get people who know what they're doing because if you're in a room full of 50 people who are all tradesmen who know what they're doing, you'll be found out in the first minute of what, you know.
Yeah. 21 years of doing it, Nick. What trade would you be and why?
God, that's an interesting question.
If you could be top of the tree in any trade, which one?
Probably a wood butcher. I think I like just the thing about. It's difficult, really. I'm slightly mesmerised by plastering. But people, Chris has become sort of the country's best known plasterer, and he did an apprenticeship when he first started down in Devon, where he was only allowed to do the inside of cupboards and understairs for the first mixing for the first 2 years of his apprenticeship. And he did all the horsehair stuff, and he's done, making troughs and horses to be able to make the coving in the old-fashioned plaster. He knows all of that stuff. He's down on the moors, so of course they do a lot of ancient buildings that they have to do in lime plaster, and so he really knows his stuff. And so when we've done some buildings that are really knackered, and we've like squared up a wall you've got a wall that's say 8 foot high by 14 foot long, and he throws wet plaster on it, and he goes backwards and forwards, and eventually he'll pick up a 6 foot straight edge to me at the end, and he'll go anywhere you like. And basically, I can put that straight edge in any direction in any part of the wall, and you can't get a fag paper behind it. And I think that ability by eye to straighten something up when you're a really top class player, there's something slightly mesmerizing about that process.
As you say, being a cabinet maker, hand making bespoke kitchens and furniture.
It's a beautiful thing to watch. We've done things where our designer Gabby, who's just wonderful, has worked on super yachts and all kinds of other things. So when we get a kid's bedroom where there's a limited amount of space, she'll come up with a design that's got the bed built into the space to take the mattress to get maximum space, with cupboards and cubby holes and openable doors and things you press that turn things around. And we get chippies come in and we ask them to do it. And what they produce in the end, the spec is so beautiful. And I've always been fascinated by watching people taking rough planks and rough wood and turning it into something that's so beautiful and beautifully finished. And there's nothing quite like, actually, when you actually end up with a wood finish and a polished wood finish, or an oiled or beautifully varnished wood finish, where you can see the grain, and you see the grain of the wood come out. The thing that upsets me the most in all the things we do is when a chippy makes something beautiful out of proper tree wood, and then the designer says, "Can you paint it blue for me?" It's like,
yeah, right. Yeah, get the decks in, cover it in paint. Now, unfortunately, we're running out of time, Nick. One question which loads of people have asked, on all 21 years of DIY SOS, who is the messiest trade? Who is the one you think, Jesus, clear up a bit?
God, I don't know, you see, because people are very good with it. I mean, the thing is, when we get trades coming in, like, for example, plasterers, you'd say, and we hit it hard. So we might get 20 plasterers come in to do a house, and we get it all in one morning or one afternoon where the whole house is done. But Chris, who's our chief plasterer, who becomes sort of gaffers the plastering when they come in, is always walking around supplying them and making sure that the remains are swept up. And I don't think I get a true picture of that, because we've always got people sweeping the floors and clearing up and providing materials, so that we work. Chris always says, a spotless sight shows a spotless mind, which I can tell you with him is absolutely not true. It's a filthy mind. So I don't know. I think landscapers is probably the toughest thing, because the amount when we build gardens in the winter where literally there's filth everywhere. You just can't help it. So, or there's times when when the leckies are in and they've actually first fixed the place, and it's literally walking through a jungle of wires hanging from the ceiling.
Sparks we've covered on this show many a times. They do not have any understanding of a Hoover or broom. Bless them.
Who don't?
Sparks, the electricians, they don't know how to clear up. It's in there.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that. There's the eternal war between electricians and plasterers about, winding up your cables and putting them in the holes so that you've cut for the lighting, so that they're not dangling and getting in the way all the time. And the cut out pieces of ceiling laying all over the floor and bits of plaster, or when they've lost the earth, or they've actually butchered their way across the ceiling and a plasterer comes back in. It's like, the number of times Chris has walked back into a room where they've had to re-chase down a wall and move a socket because they put it in behind a bookcase instead of where it should have been. And he's steaming from his ears. So that's an eternal battle, that is, between the plasterers and electricians.
You can see, I'm so pleased that you've enjoyed the 21 years, because I think all us trades are so passionate, and we do love what we do, and we do have good fun. Unfortunately,
I know you're running out of time, but I just wanted to say something quickly as well, because I do a lot. I've been involved a lot with van crime and the police, and I think it's a really important area. Very often, the people who've got in the building trade say the police don't care about van crime. It's really annoying because they don't even come out. They don't care, and they don't realise that when a builder loses his tools, it not only is it a break-in and it costs him, but he loses his trade. He can't go to work, and van crime is horrific on a grand scale across the country, and it's one of the worst, most insidious crimes you can carry out on someone, because you take away their chance to earn. But I want to say something about this, because I've worked a lot with the police about this, and the police are massively frustrated about it too. So we had a case where somebody had actually been caught on CCTV. They knew who it was. The $4.5 grand's damage to the van, $3.5 grand's worth of tools gone missing, all the other way around. Knew who it was, went round there, got him. He'd already sold the tools on, couldn't get the tools back. Took him to court, 2 weeks for the police to process him through court. He goes in, he's found guilty, £60 fine, and sent on his way. So the police then go, we go and find him, we spend 2 weeks process him, and the courts let him go. And so this is the person who's done it 14 times before. The police are literally fuming, and because they're so short-staffed, and they've got to look after, they've got to go, because there are no social services. They're looking for kids who've gone missing from children's homes, and they're trying to find people with mental health problems who've gone missing, and they're doing all the other things they have to do. So should they come out to a van crime to give you a crime number to process someone so they could be let out 2 weeks later and be the £60 fine? It's good business for the criminals, because they probably sold the tools for 300 quid, so they made £240 profit, and the courts won't do anything about it. So I want to take to builders all over the country, I understand your frustration and anger, but you need to attack the criminal system, not the police, because the police can't. They're as frustrated as you. You've got to campaign to get courts to take the crime seriously as something that stops you doing your job, and that it's a proper crime against you in terms of being able to earn for your families. That's where we need to put our attention.
The other thing is, don't buy second-hand tools if they can't prove with receipts or where they purchased them, because clearly and you stop livelihood. Well, listen, Nick, thanks ever so much. We could obviously chat for years on this, but it's been a wonderful 40 minutes having you on. Everyone watching, BBC One, 8 o'clock tonight, Children in Need, and from everything Nick has gone through, it's going to be an absolute belter. Nick, we're going to have to get you back on soon, because I'm intrigued about this inner carpenter that you're bursting to get out. So I think we're going to have to get you onto one of my jobs or something, and you can come along and stick a kitchen in or something. But we better
as Clint Eastwood once said, a man's got to know his limitations. And I think at 58, it's too old for an old dog to start learning new tricks.
Well, maybe, but I'm going to keep trying, because it'll be great to have you on the job soon. But more importantly, keep up all the good stuff with DIY SOS.
Thank you to every tradesman that's ever taken part, every supplier that's ever sent us materials. You know, people say to us, it's great what SOS do. There's like 5 of us on screen and 6 of us in the office. We don't get to build £750,000 worth of surf centre if it isn't for the people coming out and actually, turning up for their communities to build this stuff. So genuinely, a thank you from me to anybody who's ever taken part.
Well, between us, we're going to change the perception of construction, because I still believe it's the best industry with the best people in. BBC One, Children in Need, DIY SOS tonight. Everybody enjoy it. Nick, thanks ever so much. And I'll let you go and finish that lovely sandwich, but put some brown sauce in it.
You can't put brown